This is the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast, hosted by me, Kelly Donahue-Piro. This show is for growing insurance agencies looking to maximize their biggest investment, their people. Listen to the top agency performance partners clients share their story on how they boosted their performance by executing a plan. Let's head to the show.
Hey everybody, Kelly Donahue-Piro here with another awesome podcast. This one I'm so excited about because it's the number one thing I hear all the time in this industry, which is it's hard to find people. And I understand that. And that's why Tony Canas, who works for Jacobson Recruiting, we had him on our podcast talk about what's going on in the industry. And you might be surprised what you hear. So I'm curious what you think, but go ahead and listen to this podcast. And if your hiring is on your mind, this is something you have to embrace. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast. We have someone who I think today everyone's going to really enjoy because every time I talk to a client, this one topic comes up. So Tony and I may break the podcast internet with this one in insurance. So I've got the one and only Tony Canas. I'm going to let him make his introduction, but Tony is in the ever changing and ever important field of insurance recruiting now. And he's got his own podcast. He's just kind of a great icon in insurance. But Tony, I'll let you do your own honors because you can do it better than me.
Awesome. Thank you. I think of myself just as an insurance nerd and in some ways kind of the mascot of the insurance industry because I'm so colorful. Basically, I fell into insurance by accident like everybody else. Carrier side, always carrier side. Have my big disclaimer, important for your audience. I have not worked a day of my life in the agency space. But I've worked with agencies in many ways. So I went through claims, I went through underwriting, went through a leadership development program at Nationwide Insurance in the finance area, went back to underwriting, did sales management. And then I ended up creating Insurance Nerds, which is a blog podcast, video podcast, book publisher, a whole bunch of other things around the industry. The topic that really that really got me going, so to speak. I've never worked in HR, but it was the intersection of generations and insurance employment, especially millennials and now Gen Zers. So I did a lot of public speaking, usually dressed as Superman, and in the topic of millennials. And eventually I wrote the book about millennials in insurance. And that book got me a call from Greg Jacobson, one of the two CEOs of the Jacobson Group. So Jacobson is the oldest and largest executive search and staffing firm serving the insurance industry exclusively for the last 50 years, as of about a month and a half ago, 50 years exactly. And it was founded by David Jacobson, a former CNA underwriter. And this is the year 2000. It is now ran by his two kids, Greg Jacobson and Rick Jacobson, who are both co-CEOs. So all we do is insurance staffing. And so people think that I am a recruiter. And it's funny because I am not a recruiter. I work for the largest recruiting company within insurance. We really focus on the carrier space, but we do a lot of broker also and a lot of agency staffing also. So it's the largest recruiting firm within insurance, but we're big enough that we have kind of separated recruiting and sales, and I'm sales, right? So I sell consultants to the insurance industry at any level. And I have teammates that sell normal direct staffing. So together between insurance, and in the insurance nerd side, one of the things that I do is I run chatwithtony.com, which is free career advice I call it micro mentoring, free career advice for any insurance professional or any aspiring insurance professional. So about 400 people a year call into it. And that gives me, so I give them free advice and that gives me great visibility into what the talent is thinking all around the industry at all levels.
Wow.
Right. And then Jacobson gives me great visibility into kind of the 40,000 foot view of hiring in the insurance industry, which is when you reached out, I would have said no. I would have said yes to you either way. But the topic of the talent market in insurance, I'm like, absolutely.
Yeah, it's and so I'm so glad that you're here because the whole world is having a hiring challenge, or at least the United States is, right? Of just everything. I think we've all experienced supply chain issues or just, as we just talked about, I'm on the road. I've seen everything from like Burger Kings be closed because there's no staff. Everything is just crazy. And I feel like insurance, it was hard before.
Exactly.
And now it's like 10 times harder. And so there's this challenge, but I want to start off this conversation kind of very like, let's punch some people and get people thinking a bit. So I also find that almost many insurance agencies, independent agencies, which is the viewers of this audience, are using the fact it's hard to hire as an excuse. So what I mean by that is like, I will find that I have an agency I'm thinking about in my head and they're a great client, but they're like, well, Kelly, it's just really hard to hire. I'm like, well, do you have a recruiter? Do you have job posts up? Are you telling your carrier reps? Are you doing anything? Well, not actively. And so I want to just say like, and this is my philosophy. I want to hear what you say to. I say, you know what? It's hard to find the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with, but you still go out on dates, right? Like you have to put yourself out there enough so that you do find the right people. And what's your take on where we are with this hiring thing right now?
So first of all, you're absolutely right. So the entire economy it has a labor shortage, right?
Right.
And I have my thoughts on that. I don't want to get super political, but within insurance, the unemployment rate within insurance was already low, very, very low for years, for the whole time I've been involved in insurance and insurance staffing. So the unemployment rate has been jumping for insurance between 1% and 1.5%, sometimes 2% for several years. So, and we've been talking about this generational talent crisis, right? Which is what got me involved in the whole debate or in the whole thing. So now the overall country is in this crunch, and so we're getting hit double, and it's not going to go away. It might go away a little bit, but for the industry, it's not going to go away. We stopped investing or we really cut back in investing on training insurance talent back in like 2009 during the recession, and we never went back to training. So basically, we've been stealing each other's people for a long time now. In the broker space, account managers and CSRs, right? So many brokers. I worked with brokers as an underwriter, as a sales manager with insurance nerds, and now in the staffing side. And I've seen the same thing all over the country for several years. And basically, the account managers and the CSRs, the girls, a lot of brokers call them, right?
Which I hate, by the way.
That's why I do it, because yes, I completely agree.
The people running millions of dollars of your premium.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the account managers and CSRs are the lifeblood of your agency. They're the ones that keep the renewals coming in many agencies. They're the technical ones. They're the ones that really know the product and that really know the clients. It's not the producer. Like some producers are technical, but generally the account managers are. And so a lot of agencies and brokers have those women who are generally high school educated, and they've been there forever, and they're now in their 50s, maybe 60s, and they're having a very hard time, even before this talent crunch, they're having a very hard time replacing them with a new generation where the women are out-educated compared to the men by significant. They're just as ambitious, they're just as smart. They're not going to put up with no career path, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So even beyond the current crunch, for producers, say kind of the same story. Even the big houses grow by acquisition. They don't know, like most of them don't really know how to train producers. So that's another, like we have trouble in every aspect when it comes to training producers, when it comes to getting account managers and CSRs. And now COVID hits,
right?
And all of a sudden we are forced to go remote for a year and a half at a time. And the talent now realizes that they are perfectly productive from home, right? And not only that, but especially in the carrier space, your competition,
carrier space is hard right now.
Your competition has realized, right? 50%. So Jacobson and Aon do a survey of insurance hiring every 6 months. We've been doing it for over 10 years. I am not involved with the making of the survey. Although I'm involved in getting leaders to fill it out and then in distributing the results. They added a couple of questions when COVID first happened. They added a couple of questions. One, are you going to have more remote people going forward? And two, are you going to have more flexibility for your in-office people? Over and over, those two questions come back 50%, half, and I say half because so that people don't think I'm saying 15 because of my accent, 50% of carriers are saying that they will have more fully remote people going forward. 15%, no, excuse me, a further, so in total 85%, so 50 fully remote, 85 will have more flexibility for in-office people. So within the carrier space, which is very analogous to the agency space, but the numbers come from the carrier space. Within the carrier space, not every carrier knows it yet, but the industry is going remote. There is no pulling this genie back in the bottle. You are going to lose talent, and we're seeing it already. We're seeing, I'm seeing people leave long-time jobs for giant races. We're talking like 30 and 40% races without having to move. We're seeing entire teams. Imagine that. Imagine if you're on a small carrier and you have a team of 4 underwriters specialized in construction. And the same day, your entire team gives their 2-week notice and tells you that they're going somewhere else. They're staying as a team, and they're not moving, right?
Man, that makes me nervous.
It's insane. We have never seen anything like this. Jacobson, 50 years, they have never seen anything like it. And I just went to CPCU annual meeting last week, and this was it's now called InterRisk. I've been there 11 years in a row, and the main thing I do there is get to know the new people. Okay, and the new people tend to be young, right? I have never before, number one, seen a new designee class as diverse, which is really cool. But number two, I met so many new designees who shared that they have 3 or 4 years in underwriting. They finished their CPCU, they immediately changed companies. And they're now making 140, 130 grand at 27 years old.
Wow.
Petrifyingly scary how expensive. Yes, quite simply. And a lot of what I've said is carrier side. So your audience could very well be like, oh, right, our side's different. It's not. My girlfriend is a VP for a gigantic carrier. For a gigantic broker.
Yep.
They have the exact same problems. They're seeing the exact same things. And it might get a little bit better when the overall economy has a little more slack in employment, but it's not going to get a lot better. And then the demographic piece. So every year, so boomers were overrepresented in our industry by 30%
100%.
compared to the average industry. In 2017, 2018, 2019, each of those years, between 1.1 and 1.3 million boomers retired. We were expecting that to continue at about that pace until they were all retired. 2020 hits or COVID hits, 3 million boomers retired, more than double, something like 2.5 times. How is that hitting insurance? We don't know yet, but given that they were overrepresented in insurance, right? And we are, let me put it this way, at Jacobson, when we're getting calls for account managers and CSRs, we're walking away from the majority of those because we just can't fill them. Like question number one is, are you okay? Whether it's temporary, which is my side, or whether it's a permanent hire. Question number one, are you okay with remote?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not, we just walk away because we can't fill it.
So it's interesting because I want to pick your brain on this one thing I have about the remote side of things. Like many agencies have to also make sure that they start attacking certain things like walk-in payments. And I know, like, you live in Atlanta, I live in Rhode Island. We're not the type of people that ever walk into an insurance agency, but man, in my travels, I've been to these small towns, which do make up a good part of the middle of the country, right? Like, we have agencies in Wisconsin that have 5 rooftops with sometimes 3 people, because there is like this mentality sometimes in these small towns that, hey, you come down, you pay your insurance check. And, you know, it's like a little bit like going back in time sometimes, I think, for people like us, but that happens. But agencies need to, one, get that stuff down as low as humanly possible. And COVID gave us a good cover to do it without trying to tell Betty, who's come in for 20 years with their cash payment, that Betty, you don't have to anymore. But agencies need to take that opportunity. But here's my big question. And this is one I struggle with, so I'd love to talk about it with you. It's just, So we have these remote workforce. So say I'm Kelly and I'm, bright-eyed, I'm 20 years old and I'm looking for a career and I want to get into insurance. What does mentoring someone that's got no insurance experience look like in the future when everyone's remote and you don't hear those phone calls? I feel like that's a gap that we don't have clarity on, maybe on how do we invite more people in and get them comfortable and transplant all that great information of 20-year veteran into somebody when they're in, one person's in California and the other person's in, South Dakota. Like, how do we do that?
I agree with you completely. And we don't yet have best practices, right? So we're all trying to figure it out. There are things that I've seen that work better than others. And by the way, I agree with you that in your side of the world, with agencies, especially small town agencies, you're for a long time going to need at least a person or two in there to at least receive payments, 100%. And that will always be, that's just what it is. But yes, when you bring somebody new, and maybe this is first insurance job, or maybe they come from a completely different side of the insurance industry, I 100% agree that in-person is important for certain things, including training. Also for strategic work, it's also important, right? Even in insurance terms, we get together every once in a while to
you've had events and everything.
It's important. It's even there's a few times that we've gotten together just for like without a public event, just for strategic figuring out what we're doing with it. And for training, it's very important. So I think that the Jacobson model is very good. So Jacobson, when I got hired 3.5 years ago, it took us 6 months to negotiate the hiring because they wanted me to move to Chicago, and we had moved to Atlanta for my job. The next move was my girlfriend's, and she didn't want to go to Chicago. I didn't want to go to Chicago either, but she would
the winters
not
are a lot different Atlanta versus Chicago.
Exactly.
Right?
She would not come with. So I could not accept that offer. So it took us a few months to get through it. They already had some remote people, but all the remote people were people who had already been in the Jacobson office for a while, proven themselves, and then gone remote, right? So it was a whole thing for them to hire me. And in fact, years before they had multiple offices around the country, and my boss had actually put in his 2-week notice because he had to move to Michigan for family reasons, and he was a good performer. So they told him, no, you know what? We'll open a little office for you in Michigan. Not work from home, open a little office, right? How different is the world today? So anyway, what they did with me once we finally came to an agreement is they flew me to Chicago to home office, and they gave me a hotel for 2 weeks of intensive training.
Yeah.
And then, so that's expensive, but probably less expensive than giving me a desk permanently in Chicago or paying me
forever, right?
Right. So that worked. And then they said, okay, so 2 weeks, right? Now, we're not saying that you're fully trained. What we're saying is, right, like we can't keep you here forever. So from here on, here's how this is going to work. We want you to come in once a month.
Okay.
Right. We're paying for it. We're paying for the hotel.
Yep.
Come in once a month. You decide whether you want to come in for a day, 2 days, a week. It's up to you.
Yep.
And you decide when. But yeah, come in once a month so that you have that exposure, so that you have that listening to what your coworkers are doing kind of thing, right? And I kept doing that until COVID hit.
Sure.
Right. And also,
did you look forward to going? Were you like,
yes,
hey, I get to go?
Yes.
And
yes, I'm an extrovert. I'm a high I. When I went to Chicago, I would bring Costa Rican coffee because I'm from Costa Rica, and I would make coffee for the whole office for every day that I was there. Awesome. And I would be the first person in the office in the morning, make the coffee, and then I would walk around. In fact, the way the Jacobson was set up at the time, we had 15th floor. And then we have 13th. The recruiters were in 13. Well, my job is to sell the service, but they're the ones that deliver on the promise. And it's a very entry-level job. We hire a lot of like brand new grads. And there's a lot of turnover because it's an entry-level job and it's Chicago, it's expensive, right?
Yeah.
But it's a great place to start your career. And then we have some senior recruiters. So the first thing I would do every time, I'd make the coffee. And then once it was like 9 a.m. and everybody was in, I'd go downstairs and walk around the floor and meet all the new recruiters. And make sure that that in-person connection is super important to get things done.
Yeah. Because it's relationships still.
Exactly. And I believe that everything gets done by relationships, right? So yes, I looked forward to those Chicago trips. I missed those Chicago trips now that I haven't been for a year and a half. And not only that, but nowadays, so just before COVID,
Yep.
Jacobson had become significantly more remote friendly. We had a few people who had proven themselves and moved away, and the in-office people, even the new ones, had between 1 and 2 work from home days already, because the community in Chicago is a beast for just about everybody, right?
Sure. Oh, definitely.
Even though the office is in a beautiful place and it's a beautiful office, so we were already significantly remote friendly. Post COVID, the office has reopened, but it is now we're a remote first company. We're hiring remote, even for entry level roles, even for executive level roles, and nobody has to come in. Even if you want to come in every day, you have to register. You have to show proof of vaccination, and you have to grab a desk the night before on the hoteling app.
Oh, there you
Nobody
go.
has an assigned desk anymore. So we're going remote first, and for the whole time that I've been around, we've had 2 meetings a year, the annual meeting in January and the summer outing in the summer, which are celebration, training, team building, and everybody comes in, right? So I think that that's a really good balance, right? And I'm not saying that exactly 2 weeks at the beginning and once a month from there on is the right mix for every company, but something like that, right?
So it's like intentional, right? Like
very, very, very correct. So I've just said a lot. It could really be summarized to be intentional, be flexible and intentional, right? When they're in the office, they should be in the office for a reason, not to do their day job. And in fact, even millennials and especially Gen Zers appreciate the face-to-face time,
right?
But it has to be intentional. If I want to take a 45-minute commute, or if I'm going to take a 2-hour flight, don't make me do it just to do my day job.
Right.
Let's do training. Let's do strategic work. Let's do an outing. Let's do team building. Let's do the things that benefit from me being in person.
It's interesting that you say that way. I think it's a good point and then I think, we do a lot in agencies, and it still cracks me up a little bit. Because I get nervous at telling agencies we have a 2-year program, and I don't say this during the sales process because I think that I think people know enough, but I think that I don't want to freak them out, but we say you need to close your office once every quarter for training. And I come out and do the training, but I'm the office is closed. Everybody's got to be together. If there's somebody, we have one agency that's in California, they had someone move to Tennessee, they can Zoom in. We don't need them to, fly. If they want to, that's great. But if that's not part of what they can do, that's fine. And most agency owners are fine. Then some, it's what will happen? I'm nothing bad. You'll tell your customers, you'll check in if there's an emergency, and you'll be good.
Even Starbucks does something similar. Like your local Starbucks, there is a day, I don't know if it's once a quarter, but I've definitely had it happen at multiple Starbucks where I show up for my Starbucks and they have the sign on the door saying today is our company training day.
That's coffee. That's vital for survival, people.
Exactly. Now there's probably another Starbucks, at the end of the block, right? If it's a major city, but still, like even the Starbucks are okay with closing for a day to invest in their people and their team.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, because it makes it so much clearer for me, Tony. I think of because I've always struggled. I'm how do we get new people in this industry? How do you train new people? And maybe it's an idea where, hey, new people have to come in the office twice a week, or that, something along those lines, or once a month, or they need to have a mentor, someone that's coaching them. I think it's getting easier than ever before, but it's, it's just it's a different mindset that I think. And training in small businesses is so hard to begin with. I was sharing with you coming on, we're making a job offer to a new person. And I kind of said to him, I go, we don't hire every month. So we don't have a great onboarding process. I just want everyone to be under, have an expectation. We have the same problems, right? The last hire we made was in January, and it was a whole different role. And so I've got to remember, do you need a Zoom meeting link? Do you need a credit card? Do you need all these things that we have a template for that role from 2 years ago. And I'm trying to like, just tell them, I'm like, so just have your patience, but I love the idea. And we've seen more and more agencies come up with this with like, actually, when you get to a certain size, we say you should make a key hire every year, which is a role you're not thinking about, like a trainer. Like,
Okay.
you have a trainer
A
on
full-time
staff.
marketer.
Do you have a marketer? Do you have a claims specialist? Do you have, maybe a 2-person marketing team, which I know is like revolutionary, like, do you have a director of culture, that's just making sure everyone's doing great, and doing those things, or HR person. And so I think it's so interesting. Like, I really hope people listening to this, like, you have to run your agency like a business, not an agency. And there's a big, big gap on that front. Right. So
Humongous gap, but that's
yeah, there's like, we're running an insurance agency and, XYZ. I'm like, but we have to realize to run an insurance agency for the next 10 years, or to become an $80 million agency or $10 million revenue agency, your agency has to become something much more competitive and fierce and unique. So you talked a little bit up front about how people are making these, I don't want to say like demands, but like a whole team walks out, right? Or a company spends all that time, like you were talking about the underwriters, they train them for 2 or 3 years, and then someone offers them triple their salary and they're like, bye.
The numbers have become ridiculous right now.
Right.
Absolutely ridiculous. I have heard from sizable brokers who are running sizable turnover. Right, like imagine like 10 or 15% turnover thus far this year, right?
Wow.
And we're only in September, October. Not because people don't like you, but because they're getting big offers without having to move. And then as you're trying to replace them, it's taking longer than to replace them. And and I can guarantee that replacing them will cost 30, 40, 50, sometimes more % more than they were making. That's going to be a big hit to your book next year. So anyway, I interrupted your question. Go ahead.
No. I just think it's like, I'm sitting here thinking all about you're saying like, oh man, like one in the independent insurance agency side, I love what you said earlier, like the account managers. Like I have often thought that they are underpaid.
Oh my God, absolutely. Like you're being too nice.
Well, they're underpaid for a few reasons though. Like, first of all, I'll just take personal lines, right? 20, 30 years ago, there was a producer and a CSR, right? And the CSR really did transactional, what the agent told them to do, right? And then the world changed and we could generate inbound leads and we didn't need a hunter as much. Or those hunters never were profitable, but they made more money than the assistant who was doing a lot of the work, and the whole thing fell apart, right? So I still think that there's a place for a personal lines producer, but just a very different scenario. So then it's like, well, they're gone. So you just take all their work, you're licensed, you do it. And we never gave them their commission. We took that as house income. And we never trained them really well. And so now it's like they're responsible for $1 million of premium, making $45,000 a year. Right. And I think that the world has changed a lot. And I understand that there's a lot of different components to that. And by the way, as you know better than me, it's a lot different hiring someone in San Francisco than South Dakota, as far as pay scale goes, right?
Right.
The cost of living is different. I go to some places, Tony, where it's like, you look at the real estate magazine, it's like, you could buy a house for 90 grand. I'm like, I know people with cars that cost more than 90 grand. I'm like,
in Des Moines, Iowa, in 2008, I bought a small house for $57,000, and a mile and a half from Nationwide's big office.
Wow.
Like not a good school district, but I don't have kids.
Right.
And a small house, 600 square feet, old house.
Yeah.
Right. The average Des Moinean pays more than that, but not like they're not paying 500, right? The cost of living is really, really nice.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking like we go to Florida, there's no state income tax. Like there's places where like you could live with and make a bigger salary just because you don't have some of these other things. So what advice do you have for people, like from the perspective of I've got these staff members, I don't want them leaving. That jump to 3 times salary is obviously hard for any small business owner, like financially.
Yeah.
So how do we keep people happy where they are? Like, because I know you do a lot with like millennials and like what's important to them, because it's not always money.
I would, so culture is gigantic.
Mm-hmm.
Culture is gigantic. And most insurance organizations in my world, in the carrier side, they're so proud of their culture. I'm guessing it's very similar on the agency side.
Yeah.
They're so proud of their culture. Start adapting that culture a little to be more flexible. Start having more real conversations. Hey, Mary. Hey, John. Market's super hot out there. You're probably getting calls from recruiters. It's just a reality. I'm glad that you're still here. We really appreciate, you're so important to the team. I would love to know what's keeping you here. I would love to know what do you really love about working here? What do you not love about working here?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And each person is different, right? There's a generational piece, but there's also just a personality piece. So for example, so Mary says, I love working here, but my parents are getting older. I'd really love to move back to Des Moines to be close to them. And I love to keep the job, right? Boom, you've got your opportunity. Let her go remote, right? Or it could be the opposite. It could be I'm getting offers for a lot more money. How can we, right? And how can we get to the point where what I'm getting paid here is competitive? How can we change my responsibilities over time to get to that point? I think that just, especially with your millennials, the path is very important. Them knowing why they have a good future here and how to get to that future, right? Whether that future is a producer, whether that future is becoming the trainer, right? Taking one of those key jobs that you talked about. I love that concept of hiring a key job once a year, right? How can we show them the path to success within our industry? Also, another thing that this came after my book came out. I had a call with so bad with names, Nick Gerhardt. He had just finished his time as head of the Department of Insurance, the insurance commissioner in Iowa, and he had started at Farm Bureau of Iowa as head of HR. Like a year before we chatted. So we chat, and he told me Farm Bureau of Iowa is a small carrier in Des Moines, Iowa, surrounded by bigger carriers in a really competitive market. And they're a great place to work at. That's where I started my career. He said, I'm training my HR people and my hiring managers on thinking about boomerangs. So, and he explained, I'm okay with the promising kid getting 2-3 years of experience at Farm Bureau and leaving and going to Nationwide or to EMC or to travel or to wherever and getting experience there. I'm okay with that happening as long as they loved their time here. So that when we have the right, because the reason they're leaving is because we're small, we don't have the right opening for them right now, right?
Right.
But once we have the right opening for them, I want them to be thrilled to come back, right? Embrace your boomerangs. Jacobson is really good at boomerangs. Like, it's a big part of the culture. You get one, you can leave once and come back once. And
that's fair. As long as you leave on good terms. Like, you leave on good terms, you do it right. Like,
exactly.
We see sometimes where people like text, like, I'm resigning. It's like, don't text people. Do the meeting. Like, don't email like your boss while they're on vacation. Be like, I'm just giving you my notice. It's like, no, leave on good terms.
Yes. I need to make a video on how to resign, because I agree with you.
Please.
Yes, it's on my to-do list, because it's very important, very, very important. Never burn a bridge. But so that kind of flexibility, and you know what, if you have that kind of culture, you might even find, so let's say you're really small. Let's say you're like four or five people. I think you don't work with agencies that small, but let's say you're 10 people. Okay. And somebody leaving is going to cause you some deep pain. Okay. If you have that kind of relationship, you might be able to get a month notice or a month and a half notice, right? You might be able to keep them there long enough to train their replacement.
Sure.
Right. Like, you might be able to because they want to not burn that bridge.
Yep.
Right. So I think that if we can have if we can invite those conversations and make it clear that you won't be penalized for your goals just because your goals are not perfect fit to us right now. I think that would really, really help. And I don't know if I answered your question directly, but
No, I mean, I think that like the concept of culture is so important, and I feel like it's so hard. So for many agencies, it was their parents' agency. They haven't worked a ton of other places, or when they did it, they were 22 and they've been here for so long that it's hard to describe culture. I feel like it's hard to describe like having a great marriage. Like I love my husband, and like for people who don't, it's like I can't describe it for you because you have to experience it. You know, I feel the same way about leadership. If you've never been led by a really great leader, it's really hard to understand leadership. Like you just know it when you see it, as opposed to like, well, my boss is okay. I'm like, well, not your boss, your leader.
Are you familiar with Griswold and Griswold in California? Okay, so they're an agency in California, and it's a third generation agency. So Mr. Griswold, grandpa opened the agency. Mr. Griswold, father, ran the agency, and now Stephen Griswold, who's like a little bit younger than me. I'm 38. I think Stephen's like 35. Takes over the agency a couple of years back. And this is a Main Street commercially focused agency.
Sure.
So Main Street business, a lot of BOP, right? And some personal lines. So Stephen is a vegan, and he is passionate about vegan businesses and animal rights businesses. So it took him a few years to do it, but he transitions the agency to a completely remote. They gave up the lease, completely remote, national focus on vegan businesses and animal rights organizations. Cool. And they're the very best in that space, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's remote. And at this point, he's got employees in Vermont, in Ohio, like he's got employees all over the country. They still do the traditional business that they were known for locally, right? Like you still sponsor the local football team, and you still do Main Street businesses in Fresno or whatever their local area is. But that is now a fantastic agency to work for. And the thing is, he ends up attracting people anywhere in the country who fit the right, who are also vegans, who are also passionate about that.
Because you're passionate about something.
Exactly. So he's a great example. Another interesting example is very, very different from that. Barber Insurance in Santa Rosa, California.
I know them. I know Cheryl.
Awesome. So
have you seen their videos?
Yes, exactly. So I used to be Barber's American Modern sales manager. So I would visit them in person once a month, and they are just amazing people. And the office dogs, that everybody brings their dog, and the fish tank, and right, and like the reason I was their sales manager is because they have a significant book of mobile homes, right? Or
their location homes. Where they're at.
Exactly. So that book, I guarantee you, to this day, they come in to pay their bill in person, right? Like I don't know what Barber's doing today, but I know that they can't just close the office and go fully remote. But the culture they've created is such that the people that work there love working there, right? The people that work there truly love working there. That's the kind of thing that would benefit every agency, is creating such a culture that whether they're in the office or remote, you attract the people that are going to be a great fit for that culture, and they want to work with you forever.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. So we have this theory. We have an agency in Michigan, and they have a lot of work to do. They're a little. There's the father still owns the agency, and he's in his late 70s, early 80s, and so technology wise, the daughters have to leapfrog, and hey, everybody to each their own. I'm not in a judgment zone. Like he's got a great agency that pulls in millions of dollars every year, despite some of this stuff. So who am I to judge, right? But their goal in 10 years is to support working mothers by allowing them to work from home and have an insurance career. And it's like, well, if you can get out there, that will attract people that understand that you're family friendly. And they have to be balanced of putting in their work and having boundaries and things like that. It can't be 100% like the kid is screaming next to you and you're trying to take a call with a client for a review of their commercial insurance, right? But there has to be a balance to it all of, hey, we're going to support you with your home office. And, we're going to make sure that if you want to go to yoga class at 10 a.m. because that's best for you, that's your lunch break, like whatever it is. And so I think culture is so important, but I love what you said about the vegan restaurant too, because I think every agency has to find their thing, right? Like, what is your thing? And we've been encouraging agencies more and more because, my philosophy is the girls run things in a lot of ways today in agencies.
They're the lifeblood.
But know the persona, right? So we've seen a lot of cultures turn around. I'd love to hear what you think about this by just simply saying, if the girls, one of their biggest passions is their children, like they are here for their kids. They're not here in a perfect world. They'd love to be a stay-at-home mom if that was something that they could afford to do. They're constantly torn between work and home life all day long. They're tired. They're exhausted just by the nature of the beast, right? I'm like, if you go ahead and say everybody gets a scholarship, when your kid goes to college, there's $1,000 scholarship. If you say to them, your kids can have a high school job here scanning. If you say to them that when your kid makes the little league, we're all going to go and cheer them on and get t-shirts. If you start taking like a real interest in their children and, your kid made the dean's list, go take them out to dinner tonight. Like whatever it is, that will make them stay.
Forever. Jacobson is like, so our owners are two white males.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're Jewish, but they're two white males. But the company is like 80% female. Like
Mm-hmm.
it really is, and incredibly diverse too. And the leadership is like 74% female. Like, and our culture, especially as we went into COVID, having a baby in the background is very, very common in Zoom calls. Very, very, very common. And like, I don't remember one time that it's caused a problem, right? I don't remember one time that it's interrupting. It's a very, very, very mother and father friendly culture. I don't have kids, and I don't want kids, and yet it still buys my loyalty,
right?
Because I do think it's the right thing to do, and it is definitely a culture where people stay with us because of that.
Sure.
Because the company gives them the flexibility to be great parents.
Yep.
And still having a great job and a great career. So I love your example from the Michigan agency.
Well, and I think you just have to be thoughtful about it. So that whole thing of like bringing new people in and training them, there has to be an intention here. And I said this, we were at BrainShare, Jason Cass's event, and most agency owners are males, and so they struggle with understanding the account manager like role. But I go, guys, and there were ladies in the room too, but I'm like, guys, you change your sales pitch when you go into every one of these commercial clients. You don't change your sales pitch to understand the core 80% of your staff. like change your sales pitch. I want to be respectful of your time. Tony was so kind to shoot this on a Saturday based on all of our insurance traveling schedules.
We're back on the road.
I do have a question for you because I face this a lot and I want our viewers to hear this, which is, a lot of times I'll bring up, hey, we need to hire continuously. We're not just going to hire when someone quits. And I'll say, here's the list of things you need to do. And by the way, I think you need to look into an insurance recruiter if it's that hard to maybe find a head of personal lines. And they're like, recruiters. And I mean, I'm like braced for it. And it used to be that way with virtual assistants. It's like, I can't have my customers talk to somebody in the Philippines. I'm like, yes, you can. you, and then I always say, this is my second question, Tony. I like this. I'm like, recruiters, have you used one? Well, no. I'm like, so you're judging them because you have no personal experience of how this would work. Well, they're expensive. I go, have you seen a contract? No. I'm like, okay, so you have a mental block of something you have not explored or experienced. And so I'd love for people to hear a little bit about that side from you,
Perfect. So we are costly for sure.
But do you want the cheap recruiter?
Correct. It's just like you spend your time explaining to your customers that the cheapest insurance is not the best insurance.
Right.
It's very, very similar. Very, 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 very similar. You want, and again, full disclaimer, I work for the largest recruiting firm in our industry, but there's many other great ones. And you want a recruiting firm that is more than just a recruiter. You want somebody who can educate you on the market. You want somebody who can help you, who will be honest with you and tell you if you're underpaying, if you're overpaying, if you're doing something that in the job description or something that is really limiting your reach. You want somebody that will call you out,
Sure.
and so you want somebody that will politely walk away from the business if they don't feel that they can fill it. And there's many recruiting firms out there that are resume mills, and that's one of the reasons that there's a perception that we're hard to work with. Because if you go to the wrong recruiter, you very well, I need a CSR. Perfect. Here are 40 resumes. Let me know which ones you want to talk to. And then when you tell them which ones you want to talk to, oh, those are no longer available because they didn't vet them at all, right? So you want a firm that number one, that knows insurance. Number two, that will honestly tell you, we can't help on this one, the way it's priced, or because of this reason, we're not going to be able to fill it. And that will interview the candidates. So we call it screen the candidates up front, but it's really an interview that will interview the candidates up front before submitting them to you. Make sure that they have the right skill set, make sure that they fit the culture that you described, and make sure they're currently available.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you get a good relationship, and it's okay to test a few, right? It's okay. I don't need you to be exclusive with us. You can try us for this search and try somebody else for another one and see which one you really love working with. Now, what is a bad idea? It is bringing in 2, 3, 4, 5 different recruiting firms to work on the same job, because then all you're doing is confusing the market.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And on our side, we'll ask you, is anybody else working on it? And if somebody else is, we'll say, if they don't succeed, give me a call. And and by the way, if they don't succeed, when you give me a call, please bring a list of the people that they already talked to. So we can X those out, right? Exactly. So otherwise you confuse the market and make your own job hard.
But here's what I always say. I say a couple of things on this whole cost thing, right? First and foremost, I love it because when people are like, oh, you're expensive, I go, so you want the cheap consultant? Like, I literally just go right at it. I'm like, you want the cheap consultant? I'll go send you to a couple people, but there's people who have a proven track record, and I'm going to come to your office. I'm going to leave my family and my home and, be all in for you. So if you want to save $500 a month or whatever, you could go for it, but you'll get what you pay for, And insurance agents are funny at that because they hate it when clients do it to them, but they do it to every vendor too. So guys, that's just a little hint out there. The next thing that I will say is, I think what people don't understand about what you do is that you are constantly on the phones, on LinkedIn. You're constantly sourcing talent. It's not that XYZ agency comes in, now we're going to go have that. You are working databases even when there isn't a need.
My favorite question that I get every day is, do you have people in X, right? And it's agencies usually. Carriers are much better at it, but agencies, they call in and they're like, hey, do you have people in Detroit area? It's a funny question because we do all 50 states. Yeah. We have 800,000 insurance professionals in our internal database. It's half the industry, because like you said, when we're not busy, and lately we've been busy, but when we're not busy, we're building up that database. And in our case, we're going to conferences to meet people. We're building the database in many ways, not just like posting a job. We're building the database in many ways, so that when the need comes in, we're in the best position we already identified a group of candidates.
Absolutely. And then I would say too, the other thing is like, you're an intermediary. So maybe somebody's, I don't know if I'm looking, like maybe somebody's not active on the job boards because they're like, the employer's been pretty cool with me during COVID, working from home for kids. I don't know, I feel grateful to them about, and I don't know, maybe if my kid's school shuts down, is somebody else going to be as cool about it? Like, you can have those conversations, say, no, this is work from home. And if one doesn't work, we can find somebody else for you. So I think it's interesting. It's like a nudge.
and yes, correct. The passive candidates, third-party recruiters like Jacobson, who do this every day. right? I want to say we are very good, but I'm not the one calling candidates. Recruiters are. They're very, very, very good at passive candidates. Very, 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 very good. And also, there's guarantees. On the permanent staffing side, if I remember correctly, since this is not the side that I do every day, if I remember correctly, it's a 60-day guarantee. Now, it's not a money back. It's a we'll find your replacement candidate guarantee. But yeah, there are safety nets. In my side in temporary, the safety net is you can cancel at any point, no penalty. You pay only for the hours that you use. So you told me you needed, somebody to cover a maternity leave for 3 months. We found you the person, and you interview them. You say yes, and then they start and they're not right. A single email, right, and there's no penalty for us for finishing the assignment. So there are guarantees built in to de-risk the process for you.
Well, and here's the other thing I will say. I think everybody needs to value their time, right? Like when you go post on Indeed or ZipRecruiter, you're going to get a bunch of stuff and you're going to have to sift through it, and you're going to do phone interviews and things like that. And so it's like, I think everyone needs to also value their time, or the time that if maybe they come to you, they get a candidate faster. The team's not stressed out. Yeah. I mean, like there is the concept of, yes, you pay X, but your time is worth something too.
It's 100%. It's like outsourcing your payroll or outsourcing your IT or any of those kind of support services. Now, hiring is very, very important. So don't fully outsource it, but outsourcing the sourcing part of hiring, right? You're still going to have to do the final interview and figure out whether this person.
Yeah, they have to be a good fit for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally get that.
You save on all of the hard parts, sifting through hundreds of resumes, right? And figuring out where the people are.
And also the awkward conversation about what is the salary? Like we don't talk about money in this industry. Like, so it's like, if it's not a good fit, you get to the end, like this candidate, but they're way higher than you can afford. Like we all just wasted a bunch of time. Like you guys kind of handle that too.
Correct. Exactly. You only see resumes that you can afford or at least
are in your range, right?
Exactly. Hey, I've had to do this a lot lately because the market's so hot.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm calling you instead of sending you an email with the resume because we found the perfect person, but they're 15% higher than you wanted. And here's why I think they'd be a great fit. Do you want me to send you the resume?
Sure. So Tony, how can they find you guys if they're interested?
So Jacobson's super easy to find. Jacobsononline.com. You know that you have it correct because the ON repeats. Jacobsononline.com. We're also on LinkedIn. We're also on Twitter. We're everywhere. LinkedIn and the website are probably the best places. And on the career side, we want to talk careers. Chatwithtony.com. I'm happy to talk careers with you.
How can they get your book, your podcast? How can they, if they love what you have to say and they want to get more into it?
Yeah. So my personal is Insurance Nerds, insnerds.com. Tons of content there. The podcast is the largest and oldest podcast in the carrier and insurtech side. There are podcasts older than us on the broker side.
Sure.
It's called Profiles in Risk. And by the way, you know what? If you run a really interesting agency and you're doing really interesting stuff, I would love to have you on the podcast to talk about the agency. So like the agency in Michigan focused on working moms. Would love to. If you run an interesting agency, would love to chat with you. And in fact, at Chat with Tony, I do get calls from agents asking for advice. And if they're large enough, I very often go, here's Kelly. If they're a lot smaller.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Well, we'll let you get back to your Saturday. Thanks so much for joining.
Anytime, Kelly. A real pleasure.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. All right, everybody. What was your biggest takeaway from that podcast? I mean, mine is just how hot the market is, which means we can't just sit here and be victims by it and say, oh, well, it's too hard. It's too this. We have to go into a zero excuse mentality. And that mentality means what we need to really do and focus on is how can we be competitive, drive that culture, do the little things that matter today more than ever. Hopefully that you've opened your mind a little bit on the recruiting side as an option and an opportunity for your agency to grow. We're signing off here, but have a ridiculously amazing day.
So you may have caught on by these videos that we have a Q4 plan and execute course. And this is all about really end of year planning.
I can't speak enough about it. I think it's so important and critical that every agency has a plan. And if you're like me, I need a workbook. I need something to write out. Tell me what to think about. Tell me what sections, and I am there. And that's what we did for you at your agency. So if your agency is starting end of year planning, this is what you need to focus on. Take advantage of the cost savings until October 31st. After that, it's $1,000 in our online store. Still worth it, worth every penny. There's management system guides in there, there's reporting, there's workbooks, there's stuff for your team, there's everything that you need. But take advantage of the savings while you can. Thanks so much. We hope to welcome you as a new student.